Hello board game brothers and sisters. I got a special video for you today. I promised that I would go over every game in my collection if we hit 4,000 subscribers, which we just hit the other week. So I'm taking some time today to do a quick video using the phone and the lapel mic, just like the good old days when I started this channel. I guess let's just start by getting a full view of the collection. So just a little background, I'm not the type of gamer that tries to own every great game, although there are quite a few games that I do want to add to my collection here. I like to have games that are very different from each other, but what I basically do is I try to have a game that scratches a certain itch, and then I just try to find the best game in that category. So if I end up playing a game that scratches a certain itch, if it overlaps with a game in my collection and I like it more than that game, the one that I have in my collection ends up leaving and I'll replace it with that new game. So as I play more and more games, my collection gets very dense in the variety it offers, and I usually end up having a game for any situation. But there still is quite a lot of games here, and I don't want this to be a 2-hour episode, so I'll just be giving you the cliff notes of each game. And why not just start where it all began, with Codenames, which is my favorite game to bust out at family get-togethers, or if you're playing with new people that are a little reluctant to playing board games. And I think most of you are familiar with Codenames. It's a word game where players play on teams, and each team has a clue giver that gives one word and one number, and that's all that they can say. The word represents a clue of the cards that they want their team to pick, and the number is usually the number of cards that they want them to pick. It gets pretty hilarious trying to get into your teammates' heads, and it's very accessible, and that's why it's one of my favorites in my collection. And next we have Palm Island, and this is my favorite solo game that you can take anywhere. It also plays 2 players, but I've never played it that way, and I don't really intend to. And as the name implies, this whole game takes place in the palm of your hand, so you don't need a table or anything. You can lay back on the couch and play it, and you're essentially rotating cards in your hand to gain different resources, and then you're going to be using those resources to rotate cards 180 degrees or even flip them to upgrade them to new resources. And something that's really cool about it is that there's different achievements that you can unlock, and then that adds new cards and upgrades to your hand, making it play a little bit differently each time you play. And then we have Open Ocean, and this is my favorite drafting filler game. This game actually replaced Sushi Go for me. It has a little bit more going on than Sushi Go. You're still drafting, but instead of just set collecting, you're going to be placing tiles down, and the different tiles can only be put next to certain other tiles, and there's different restrictions that just make it a little bit more interesting. And then we have my Lucky Duck dice set, which is my favorite dice set, and if you ever catch me playing D&D, I'll have ducks in hand. And then we have Secret Hitler, which I actually haven't played. I actually bought this one because I think my gaming group would actually like it. So sometimes there's games I think I like that I don't buy because I know my gamer group probably wouldn't be into it. So this is actually the inverse of that because I'm not a huge fan of deduction games. But if I am going to play a deduction game, this looked like the one that I would like the most. Actually, that's a lie. There is a deduction game I do like, and that's Bang the Dice game. So I should probably add that to my collection right away. And then we have Incan Gold, and this is my favorite little filler push your luck game that plays high player counts. In this game, you're essentially just putting cards out on the table, and the cards reward different treasure to the players that are willing to go deeper and deeper into the deck of cards. But players can stop at any time because there's hazards in the deck, and if you ever get 2 hazards of the same type, then you bust and you lose everything that you've collected that turn. And then we have Scopa, which is my favorite Italian card game that I played while growing up. And this is actually a really awesome game. If you haven't tried it, I definitely recommend it. It's a lot like Euchre, but better because it has multiple ways to score, and it's just more exciting and you get to yell Scopa once in a while. I don't think that's actually in the rules, but we like to yell it anyway. And next we have Fox in the Forest, which is my favorite 2-player trick-taking game. This has a really neat mechanism where you want to get tricks, but you don't want to win too many, because if your opponent gets less than 3 tricks, then they end up getting the maximum points for that round. So you either want to be forcing your opponent to get tricks or trying to get in that sweet spot in between without getting too many tricks yourself. Some cards also have some special powers, which just makes it a lot of fun. And then we have Letter Jam, which is my favorite word game, and I'd play this in the same scenario that I would play Codenames. It's really easy to learn and fun to play, but it's actually entirely a cooperative game where each player has their own word that they're trying to guess, and it comes in the form of a set of letter cards. You can only put out 1 letter at a time, and then each round, players all try to form the best word that they can using all the letters that the players put out. During this time, you still can't see your own letter, so basically based on the word that the team comes up with, you're going to have to try and infer which letter is yours. And it's not so obvious because there are some wild cards which will jam you up. And then we have Ravine, which is my favorite cooperative survival game. And in this game, you and everyone else have crash landed on a remote island, and you're trying to go through a deck of cards to reach the rescue card at the end of the deck. There's a day and night phase, and during the day phase you can spend a health to go and forage a card, and then hopefully you'll bring back some food to regain health. You'll also find things like rocks and sticks and beehives and moose that can damage you, so it's always a little bit risky, but it's a necessary thing if you want to win the game. Luckily, this is a cooperative game, so if you're running out of health and you weren't able to find any food, maybe one of your neighbors will be kind enough to give you some of theirs. Of course, you're probably going to be trying to keep yourself alive before your co-passengers, so there's always a little bit of push and pull. After the day phase, there's a night phase where really bad stuff can happen, and if you enter that phase with only 1 health, you have to draw a madness card. The madness cards add some sort of affliction to the player, which is usually pretty fun and exciting. But if you do get this game, I recommend going through those madness cards and pulling out the ones you don't like, because there are quite a few that aren't very fun. And then we have Zombicide 2nd Edition, and this is my favorite Zombicide. And the reason that this one's my favorite is because I think there's actually quite a few issues with the other Zombicides. You might be fine with the retail edition, but if you have a Kickstarter copy, throwing in all your abominations into the monster deck really imbalances the game. And I really don't want to go through and manage that every game I play. I just want to throw all the cards in and forget about it. And this version actually fixed that issue by putting in generic abomination cards. And when you draw one of those, you'll draw from a separate abomination deck, so that you'll always have that proper ratio for a balanced game. There's also a number of other improvements, like a much more interesting map where you can achieve different objectives that actually influence the way that the map looks, and it tells a little bit more of a story. It also always bugged me how similar all the zombies looked in Zombicide Invader, and we'd get them confused all the time. And also that you couldn't shoot your guns in space, because you can definitely shoot guns in space. This one is still in wrap, but I have played the game, so hacks, I'm not adding this one to my shelf of shame count. And then we have Cosmic Encounter, which is just straight up my favorite competitive game, which is kind of funny because this game actually has quite a lot of take that in that, but it's just done so well. And you'll find yourself with cards that you'll be planning ahead, saving those cards for an epic turn that will be epic, but it's not going to go the way that you expected it to. And this is just a game with a solid set of rules that just gets broken at every turn. There's a ton of different alien races you can play as, and each one of them has an awesome power that will break the game in some way. And there's a ton of powerful cards that will also break the game in some way, but it's all balanced with the negotiation. And the box art just makes it look like the geekiest game you could possibly find, but it's actually the most hilarious game. You have to play this if you haven't already. It's the law. And then we have Isle of Cats, which is my favorite polyomino game where you're going to be rescuing cats from an island and trying to fit them on your boat. Cats of the same family will score you higher points, and you also gain points for covering up different mice. Card drafting also plays a large role in this game, as each round you're going to be drafting different cards. And it also has a nice little theme that's pretty welcoming to new players. And then we have Terraforming Mars, which is my favorite engine builder, where you're going to be drafting different cards and building oceans, cities, and forests to try and raise the livability of Mars. It also includes gaining and converting cubes between different resources and cards falling off the table by the end of the game. And then we have Kemet, which is my favorite Matago reprint that I haven't played. I know, shame. And then we have the little expansion here. And then we have Okko Chronicles, which is my favorite game of King of Average's favorite games. And I haven't played this one yet. King of Average's patrons actually put together a little fundraiser and actually won this game in that fundraiser. Pretty cool. And then we have Anachrony, which is my favorite giant, massive, ridiculous box that I haven't played. And let's jump over to the other side. And we have Cthulhu Death May Die, which is straight up my favorite co-op game. And this game offers a ton of different scenarios that all play quite a bit differently. It's pretty impressive. And both you and your enemies will be getting super powerful as you gain new abilities as you go closer and closer to madness. But if you go too mad, you lose the game. And there's also a bunch of other ways to lose the game. So there's lots of pressure on this one. But there'll be times when you and other players pull off some pretty sweet combos, and it's pretty damn satisfying. Then we have Seventh Continent, and this is my favorite exploration game. The game offers quite a few different scenarios, and something that I really like about it is there's not really much narrative in it at all. It's all sort of inferred, so as you play, you're discovering different tiles and exploring the island, and you'll discover different clues that sort of allude to what was here before. Players are normally trying to break a curse that was put on them, and there's a ton of different puzzles, skills, and tools that you'll be jumping between. And then we have Dinosaur Island, and this is my favorite combo game. It has worker placement, dice drafting, push your luck, and engine building. And I admit I wasn't a huge fan of the art. I think a lot of people share that sentiment. The actual box art is pretty awesome. It's just that the actual cards and tiles in the game leave a little bit more to be desired. And this is a bit of a knockoff of Jurassic Park, but I kind of like that because I find that people are more willing to play games that aren't really tied to a specific IP that many people maybe aren't so excited about. And as you can see here, I combined the core game with the Totally Liquid expansion into a single big box. Let's take a quick look at that. I'm not sure exactly what I did here, but it really seems to work. I ended up putting the bottom of one of the boxes in the top of the other, so I'll magically remove that. And then I just have all the boards down there with a few extra components. Just don't ask me to repeat this because I have no idea how I did it, but I like it. All I have is the Blood Rage Extras box here because I loaned the game to a friend, but it's my favorite area control game. The core of the game is card drafting and area control as you're trying to dominate the land with your Vikings, and you even earn points by being killed and being sent to Valhalla. This game is about the perfect size game for an area control. It does have some crazy minis, but it doesn't overdo it like we see today with a lot of Kickstarters. And then we have Rising Sun up here, which is my favorite area control game that pairs with my favorite area control game. And I usually play this one if we want to have a little bit more. It's a little bit less streamlined with more going on, but it is a fun game that plays very differently from Blood Rage. This one does get a little bit into the too many minis category, but I can't complain because they're all pretty awesome. And then we have Dwellings of Eldervale, which is my favorite worker placement / area control game. And this game will have you putting workers out on different hexes to perform different actions as you battle mean monsters and mean other players. The solo mode in this game is actually quite incredible, so if you're a solo gamer, I highly recommend it. But if you get the version without the sound bases, don't worry about it because I absolutely hate them. If you've ever noticed the giant stereo system behind my studio here, you'll know that I'm a bit of an audiophile, so I just can't stand the low quality sound that those speakers give from those Dwellings of Eldervale bases. And now let's get into this center rack. I already went over these top ones, so the first one we're going to look at is Roll Through the Ages, which is my favorite simple roll and write. This game can be taught in minutes and it's quite a lot of fun. I actually got this one for free because a Kickstarter I ordered got a little bit messed up and they had to resend it, so they threw in an extra game for me, and I don't remember who that was, but thank you. Something that makes this game really fun is that you're locking in dice, but if you roll skulls, that can harm you, but if you roll 3 skulls, you can actually harm the other players. So it's always fun to take that risk of locking in a skull that might hurt you, but with a little bit of hope that you'll hurt your opponents instead. And then we have Wreck Raiders, which is my favorite lighter combo game. This game has dice rolling, dice drafting, set collection, you can build fish tanks to score points, and it even has a tiny bit of worker placement. And this is just a game that rewards you at every turn. Players will be putting their scuba divers on different shipwrecks to get different rewards, and if you put your scuba diver beside another one, they also get a reward. Or you can even knock other scuba divers back to the beach, which also rewards them. This is published by Kids Table Board Games, so maybe I'm just a kid, but I would definitely qualify this as a gamer's game. It just happens to have that very accessible theme that almost no one can say no to. And then we have Raptor up here, which is my favorite 2-player abstract strategy game disguised with a raptor theme. And in this game, you're going to be playing either as the scientist trying to steal all the baby raptors for your studies, or you'll be the raptors trying to eat all the scientists. Has a really neat simultaneous reveal system that players will use to perform different actions, and you either get to move based on the difference of the numbers or you get to perform the action on the card. So depending on which one you want on that turn, you're going to have to try and play above or below your opponent, and if you don't, you can still try to make the best of it, which makes this a very solid game. And then we have Endogenesis, which is my favorite shiny box indie designer game where you're going to be different gods trying to fight different monsters as you level up your skills. You'll be getting different cards to upgrade your powers, but then you can also upgrade your cards to get pretty ridiculously OP. This game offers a competitive and co-op version of the game, and they're both quite excellent. And then we have Fantastic Factories, which is my favorite little filler engine building game. And this is pretty much one of the best examples of what an engine builder is. You'll be gaining different cards which will grant you different abilities and dice mitigation because you'll also be rolling different dice, and it has a pretty awesome dice system in it as well. And then we have If Wishes Were Fishes, which is my favorite collector's collector's item. I bought this game for a specific purpose, and it's because it has the coolest component that I've ever seen. And this game has players playing different cards, and you can choose to either catch the fish or let it go to gain a wish. And you're going to be gaining different fish that you can sell at a market, and the market will be changing the value of certain fish depending on where certain meeples land. And here are the awesome components. Look at them, they're hilarious. Little worms. Let's get one out. This is actually a pretty fun game as well, and if you get it, it'll worm its way into your heart. Next we have Galaxy Trucker, which is by my favorite designer that just so happens to be also the designer of Codenames, and this is my favorite real-time game. Real-time in board games is not really a favorite mechanism of mine, but this one does it really well. Players are going to be racing to build ships, and you're going as fast as possible so you can get the best components. Then you're going to be flying your ship through space to try and deliver different resources for points, but you're going to be getting hit by meteors and pirates on the way, and your ship's going to fall apart, and you're going to be limping your way to the finish line. And the whole goal of this game is to earn $1 space dollar by the end. And if you do, you win the game. And if more people do, then whoever earned the most wins the most. And next we have Port Royal, which is straight up my favorite card game. And this is a push your luck game where the cards double as your money, and you're going to be trying to draw different cards. But as you're drawing cards, different pirate ships are going to show, and if you get 2 of the same colored pirate ships, you bust, and all other players will laugh at you. And then after you've decided to stop, and if you didn't bust, you get to pick a card to purchase. And then that area essentially becomes a market where other players can buy a single card, but they have to pay you $1 first. Really awesome game here. Definitely give it a shot if you can, and it's super affordable. And then we have Sagrada, which is my favorite abstract strategy, dice drafting, dice pattern building game. And in this game, you're going to be rolling different dice and then drafting them from a pool as you try to build up your stained glass window. This box art looks amazing, and so will your stained glass window once you've completed it. And you're essentially trying to build your stained glass window without putting 2 dice of the same color or the same number beside each other. There are special cards that will allow you to break these rules, and people often compare this game to Azul, which I've never played and probably will never play. I've had the opportunity to play Azul and I just didn't even care for it. If you ever ask someone which one is their favorite, it's usually a toss-up between the two, but Sagrada just looks way cooler on the table, and therefore it's more fun. And next we have Marvel United, which is my favorite Marvel game. And although this one is out of its wrap, I've never actually played it. So let's go on to Lords of Vegas, which is my favorite game that uses paper money and should have obviously used poker chips. And the game that I would compare this to the most in my collection is Cosmic Encounter. It has those same moments when you're going to be laughing at yourself and other players, and essentially you're building different casinos, and building more of your casinos in a specific area will gain you different benefits, but players can also go around and gamble at each other's casinos. And I know it sounds kind of lame with the way I'm describing it, but it is super not lame. It's an awesome game and you should try it. And I realize it sounds completely different than Cosmic Encounter, and that's because it is. It just has those same hilarious moments that you don't always find in different games. And that's why it's one of my favorites and it's in my collection. And next we have Mechanica, which is a sleeper hit, and this is my favorite game that uses puzzle pieces. I love games that have something unique about them, and this game does. This game is all about building killer robots, and although it has nothing to do with the actual gameplay, it's a nice little overarching theme that the game likes to remind you of periodically. Players are buying puzzle pieces to put on their puzzle assembly line. And of course, different pieces have different abilities, so you're going to be building this assembly line to build these killer robots, and as they are manufactured, they'll go down your assembly line, and depending on the puzzle pieces you put there, you can split robots into multiple robots, combine them into more powerful ones, so on and so forth to gain more points. The box also has a pretty awesome insert with a component that spins around and pushes any pieces that weren't bought from the market into a trash compactor. And next we have Oath, which is probably my favorite leader game. And this game's pretty interesting and unique because it remembers the last time you play. Basically, you're going to be an exile, a citizen, or the chancellor. And the way that this game remembers is that the laws and the different cards put into play will be persisted the next time you pull the game from the shelf. So it's always an ever-changing game based on the decisions that players made while playing it last. And this is another game that I've never played. And next we have Chai, which is my favorite overproduced game about tea. For me, it replaces Century Spice Road, and although it plays quite a bit differently from it, it just scratches that same itch for me, and I like this one more. And I have wrestled with getting rid of this one in my collection. I don't play it too often, but it does have an accessible theme if I'm having people over that don't normally play board games. And next we have Fog of Love, which is my favorite dating sim. And in this game, players are less concerned about winning, although there are challenges that you're going to be trying to complete. But you're going to be putting together a character and you're going to be put into different scenarios where players are going to have to role play and make different decisions depending on what their character is like. Once again, a game I don't really ever play, but I just like how different it is, and there's nothing else like it that I know of. And the role playing in it makes it a lot of fun if you're a charming character like myself. So no matter how the relationship goes in the actual game, you'll still be falling in love with me. And then we have Vindication, which is my favorite cube conversion game where players will be moving along different locations on a board. And it's really interesting how movement works in this game because you're moving on the border of tiles and not on the tiles themselves. The game has a really well done cube conversion system where different cubes will combine into a different type of resource. And this game is just like nothing else I've ever played, and therefore I want it in my collection. And it's also a lot of fun. But I've never felt the need to play with this expansion just yet. And then we have Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, which is my favorite way to play Gloomhaven. I never even got or attempted the original because it was just way too crazy and I didn't want to get a hernia just from pulling it off the shelf. But Jaws of the Lion iterates on the original Gloomhaven and streamlines it a lot more and provides you with a very handy adventure book where you don't have to set up complicated tiles. This version is just much more accessible, and I actually bought it at the start of this whole quarantine thing with COVID, so I actually haven't played this one yet, but for good reason because I haven't really been able to see anyone. I have considered playing it solo, but I do want to play this one with some friends. And next we have Caverna, which is my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game. Or maybe it's Agricola, I don't know, it depends on the day. But this is essentially a family and farm simulator where you're going to be raising your family and then sending them to work to take care of different animals and crops. And rocks. Fun fact, this box also weighs 5,000 kilograms. And for all you Americans out there, that's approximately 16,723 pounds. And next on the shelf is Scythe, which is my favorite Stonemaier game. And this is probably going to leave my collection because I would just rather play Dwellings of Eldervale any day. It sort of scratches the same itch, and I like Dwellings of Eldervale more, so this one's probably gonna go. I did recently buy the Rise of Fenris expansion, which I haven't played, but I've heard good things. One Stonemaier game I haven't played yet, but I've had my eye on for a while, is Viticulture. So I'd really like to give it a shot sometime. Hopefully it's my favorite and I can get another Stonemaier game on my shelf. And next is Vast, and this is my favorite game that was gifted to me for being a best man at a wedding. And this one doesn't get too much play because it does ask a lot of its players. It's an asymmetric game, so each player does have to read their own rule set, which does make getting this one to the table quite difficult. And if any one player plays their character wrong, it can kind of ruin the game. This is essentially the precursor to Root, so if you like Root, you might like this one as well. Then we have Barren Park, which isn't really part of my collection, I just have it sitting here. I have played this game, but I'm not a huge fan of it personally. I'd rather play Isle of Cats, but I bought this one for a giveaway back when I was focusing on my board game designs. I would occasionally run some giveaways to get a little bit of publicity, and this was way before I started the channel. And next we have Freshwater Fly, which is another game I've never played. I think for the most part people do like this game, but it's just not getting played on my shelf. And then below that we have another copy of Endogenesis. And this is actually pretty cool because I had already owned this game when the Kickstarter was launched for the expansion, so I decided to do a video on it. I don't think too many people were covering this game because it is from a smaller indie designer, so it doesn't get as much coverage as some of those big campaigns. But I really did like the original game, so I wanted to offer some publicity, and I did buy the expansion out of my own pocket because I like the game, but the designer decided to send me some extra copies just to show their gratitude. And that's pretty awesome because usually when people offer to send me games, they want something in return, which is why I never take games. And next we have Fire Tower, and I haven't played this one either, but in my defense, I just literally got this yesterday. And this is my favorite game that Jesse of Quackalope pretty much ordered me to buy, so I did. So if this isn't my favorite, Jesse, that's on you. And then we have Super Fantasy Brawl, the giant white box that has way too much plastic in it. And this is my favorite head-to-head skirmish game where players are going to be drafting different characters and then fighting against each other using different cards and abilities. I do like this game, but I don't know if I want to keep it just because of how much space it takes. I do have a few other skirmish games on the way, but I don't think any of them will be as easy to table as this one is. So it might still have a spot in my collection. And many of you may not have seen a shelf that looks like this before, so I guess I can end this video off by showing you my favorite shelf, and it's called a BoxThrone Shelf. I bought this out of pocket and I have zero regrets. They've never given me anything, so this is completely my unbiased opinion. I did have Calyx shelves and they took up a lot of space. This one is obviously a bit more expensive, but I feel like I'm getting much more value for the cost. Don't get me wrong, Calyx shelves do look good and they do a great job of housing your board games. But for myself, I'm just not a huge fan of particle board, and I just find that these BoxThrone shelves look so much better, and they are solid metal. Except for this part up here that's plastic. A very different video here, so let me know what you think, and maybe I can start doing something like this on a more regular basis. And that's it for now, so until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.